I would like to thank the Neuroscience Congress for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts with you all. And clinical psychologist from Ahmedabad, India, and I'm attached to Zydus Hospital and two leading institutes of India, Mundra Institute of Communication, Ahmedabad, and National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad. So I deal with a lot of students, and it's because of I deal with so many students. It's I would like to share certain struggles the students are facing. Basically, I here to share and throw some light on emotional and psychological challenges that are faced by the Indian students and which are usually goes unnoticed, and it affects their life, and provide certain tools, like self-help practical tools, so that can enhance their resilience, and they can build the resilience and even coping mechanism. So I'm share my PPT regarding the unveiling the unseen, the exploring the hidden struggle faced by the Indian students. Basically, mental health challenges are significantly impacting college students in India, and with more and more issues like stress, anxiety, depression, uh, and suicidal ideation. And the other thing I face is substance use. It's increasing day by day. And there was an article in India Times in 2013 that also showed that, that published that, and it was about the how uh, mental health is overlooked and disregarded regarding the college, in India regarding the students. So I would like to, throw some light more on the what are the struggles being faced by Indian students in the colleges, and how they can help themselves. How, yeah. Basically, mental health concerns are increasing, and most of the time students are also not aware that they are facing challenges because they are so much involved in their own day-to-day life. This is what my observation in being with attached to two institutes, that and they are silently struggling and not able to pinpoint what exactly is going on in their life. There was a study done by and published in Asian Journal of Psychiatry, which, according to them, 53 Indian students experience uh, moderate to extreme severe depression. And another study was done by Yordos. Yordos is a platform, online platform in India, which support mental health of students or anybody. Most of the institutes are attached with Yordos, providing the services to them, their students. So according to them, 74% suffer from high to severe stress. There was a study published by R.M. Hakami in 2018, and that, according to that, approximately 25.8% experience high social anxiety. So basically, understanding and addressing this complex phenomena of crucial and supporting the college students is very important for their mental health. So I'm going to share a couple of stories shared by my students. Uh, Basically, the this story indicates how the emotional struggle toll was taken by high expectation from the family, because of fear of failure. The student had a fear of failure because the parents had a very high expectation, and a student herself was a very a top student all throughout. And she was suffering. Basically, there was an academic pressure, and due to first time in the college and all, she was also struggling with competing with other high uh, academically high intelligence students, and that also made her feel that she's not good enough. And a lot of students I have seen that are facing with the low self-esteem, and it's basically highlights how fear of failure can erase one's own identity and isolate them from emotional attachment. This is another story shared by another student. It's basically speaks of the silent struggle, and when you're not heard, when you feel that not you are seen in the crowd. Many students struggle to connect socially due to fear of rejection or past negative experiences, also make them hard to open up in the group. I have, whenever there is a new batch coming in the college, I have come across a lot of students coming to me complaining that they are not able to connect with other people. So this is a very, very crucial thing in most of the colleges when they instantly form a group and you're not included in the group. That leads to social anxiety, low self-esteem, and it basically, you start self-doubting and you go into withdrawal. Another thing is being a diverse culture in India. There is another problem of language differences. So that also creates a feeling of being left out. And if a student is little introvert, other may misunderstand and avoid that person. Like, that person is reserved and they not open to include that person in the group. And basically in today's comparison driven environment, constantly seeing others bond effortlessly can deepen the sense of isolation. These are, like, I've put the stories which are very, very common in the colleges that I have come across. There's another is being fear of being seen. There is still a stigma in India in the colleges that that in spite of like being creating so many awareness and so much media is showing that that the even our actor actresses are also putting their things that talk about depression and all that, still there is a stigma. There's a fear that if I go to if somebody sees me, they will feel that I am weak, I'm not strong, and being they'll judge me. So that is discouraging the students to seek mental help. And so there is a need to create more and more awareness in the colleges, in the schools. And I feel like that including a topic, a subject in one of the semester, like about managing yourself, managing being creating self-awareness or dealing with how to deal with your emotions also will help the students to cope with their mental health issues. So these are the basically like what are the factors that contribute to mental health issues. So like first is academic pressure. We talked about other things, but this is another thing which lead to which avoid them seeking help. Behavior is also there, which because of the pressure they avoid seeking help and they are not realizing that they are under pressure, and the constant stress that lead to sleep disturbance, either undereating or overeating, then constant negative thoughts, their their performance, academic performance also reduces, then their participation in the group will also reduce, their self motivation also reduces, and I have come across people developing somatic symptoms also due to academic pressure, not able to cope with the academics. Another is socio-cultural pressures, fear of being judged. Basically, this is social anxiety. They struggle with group work and presentation, the avoidance of social events, feeling unheard, social isolation, loneliness. A lot of students are passing through relationship issues, again, due to high stress and anxiety, and not able to, understand each other. And substance use is increasing day by day. One more thing is like a financial stress, which is also creating a lot of stress and anxiety and depression in students, because the institutes fees are increasing, and the now, as we see, due to economical issues and, how the world is going, that a lot of people are being laid off and all, less and less opportunities, high paid jobs are decreasing. And when they have taken loan and all, it is again a stress on them to perform well, and how to pay off the loan. So all these things are creating a lot of stress and anxiety and social ideation in the students, which is alarming. One more thing, important thing, is social media, and it is significantly affecting not only students, even adults. I have seen, I do, I get adult clients coming to me because they are addicted to my social media, and that is creating a lot of stress, anxiety, and panic attack in them, and it leads to social depression, anxiety. Students are not able to sleep because they're constantly on the phone. There, it affects the attention span and the comparison, constant comparison. Then even body shaming, procrastination. When, even if you have observed, when people are sitting on the dining table, everybody first is they are constantly on their mobile. They are, nobody is talking in the social gathering. Most of the time we are all on our phone. So that is one more alarming thing that is going on, not only in the colleges, but in the day-to-day life also. Emotional struggle leads to self-doubt, low self-esteem, low confidence seeking, and then student is constantly seeking external validation, sleep deprivation, and feeling helpless. So what is happening here? It's basically when you are constantly having stress, anxiety, and depression, your mind is in constant negative thoughts. That is the inner chatter, that emotional struggle. It reinforces our emotional struggle by lowering self confidence and increasing anxiety and sadness. So Buddha described, our human mind as being, it compared with the, like monkeys, like, monkeys jumping from branch to branch. And the same way our mind is busy, constantly busy in with from chat, constantly lot of thoughts are going on in our mind. And our brain is like, as one thought is we release, the it is absolutely ready to grab another thought. There's constant noise is going on, and that is very stressful. So students, when they are struggling emotionally, there is constant inner chatter going on, the negative inner chatter going on. And basically that also affects, and there is a cycle going on because of these constant inner chatter and negative thoughts. They are not able to come out of that loop and face the and become resilient and cope with the challenges. So these are basically the strategies that I have note down to help the students to, you know, uh, basically deal with their day-to-day challenges and enhance their resilience and coping skills. So recognizing the triggers, basically developing the awareness, allows us to identify and address the negative thought, and more basically accepting manner. When you accept your problems, you are able to deal with it. But most of the time students are in denial. Then identifying unwanted and unhelpful thoughts also helps you challenge, how to navigate them. There are certain techniques of how to challenge your thoughts. Basically, one is interruption of negative thoughts. So here you are actively stopping the negative thinking in the moment. As soon as you get the thought, what you can do is internally in your mind or aloud, you can tell yourself to stop, do couple of breathing, and think of something which is positive at the same moment. Like, for example, if I am thinking I'm going to fail in the exam and I'm not smart enough, and I'm not studying enough, I'm going to fail in the exam. So, what I need to do is I have to tell my brain to stop, do some breathing, and instantly tell myself and look at and review this part that I have studied and what I have finished in the academics. So, consciously doing the effort to restructure your thoughts also helps in dealing with that constant negative chatter. Another is cognitive distancing. Here, what you're doing is you are writing your thoughts in third person, like he or she, or giving some name. The automatically you are dissociating yourself from the thought. So the intensity of the emotion that is affecting you will also reduce. The emotion that you are experiencing will reduce, and you'll be able to slowly deal with your negative thoughts. The other is cognitive restructuring, is like restructuring the thought, I'm not good enough. I am I am going to fail. So no, I have put in the efforts and I have done my best, and I'm going to perform whatever I can. So that is restructuring. Maintaining a thought journal also helps in maintain in dealing being a self awareness. It increases self awareness, and you can pinpoint what are the thoughts that are disturbing you and that are triggering you those emotions. Affirmations are very, very powerful, and basically whenever we are dealing with emotional things and whenever we have constant negative thoughts, our self esteem, self love, self belief is all low, and we are not able to accept and love our own selves. So, affirming ourselves that I love and accept myself and I'm capable, I'm strong, also helps in developing self esteem, and it's a powerful tool to develop emotional resilience. The another thing is morning pages. So morning pages is a daily routine that as soon as you get up, you write down your thoughts, and basically it helps help you self sabotaging and constantly you are your it increases your productivity during the day, because once you write it down and you tear it up, so those thoughts at the surface that are bothering you when you get up, there is a the moment we get up, we whatever unconscious mind was going on in the sleep, there are certain thoughts on the surface. So when you write it down and tear it up, you are clearing the clutter in your mind, and that helps to create the deeper, it helps in reducing the anxiety and stress, and it increases the productivity. Lot of students of mine have adopted all these techniques and they've been successful. Gratitude journal is also very powerful. Being grateful, it again shifts our focus from what we don't have. When we are negative, we are always focusing on what we are lacking. So when we show gratitude, our focus shifts from negative to positive, and we become more, becomes more meaningful and hopeful in life. Then building supportive relationship, like creating a social group, or any, and even having students who are also struggling, and creating and talking to them, and student support also will help them maintain their, and being more positive about things. Enjoying the joyful activities, uh, doing regular mindful activities like uh, breathing exercise like 4-7-8, like inhaling with the count of 4, holding for count of 7, and exhaling with the count of 8. Another, there is a Hawaiian breathing called piku piku breathing. Like, when you are inhaling, you focus on your navel, and when you are exhaling, you focus on top of the head. So basically, all these exercises are what they are doing. They are shifting your attention from the thought, the negative thought, to the breath. So you are you are breaking the loop of constant negative thoughts, and that is the purpose of all these mindful exercises. Grounding exercises 5 4 3 2 1. So, five things that you observe, that you see around you. You have to focus for 2 minutes on the five things that you see around you. Four things that you hear around you, or three things that you feel around you on your body, in your body. Like if you're sitting in the chair, how your feet are touching the ground. If there is a breeze, how it is touch, how you're feeling on your skin. Then two things that you smell, and one that is the taste in your mouth. So each sense you observe for 2 minutes. That is the grounding exercise. By doing mindful exercises, it really helps to navigate your constant negative thoughts and your stress and anxiety. Water is extremely important for the body and mind. Doing physical exercise also releases cortisol. So, regularly doing physical exercise is extremely important. And sleep, again, and healthy diet. S- Having like to sleep 7 to 8 hours sleep is required to, even process the information, and for memory, for attention, and for mental health and physical health. 6 to 7 hours of sleep is required. So, identifying and acknowledging invisible battles, emotional struggles, we can create campuses that are not just center for learning, but spaces for understanding, compassion, and support. I deal with a lot of students, and that was the reason why I felt that there is a need to create the awareness and help the students in this day in life. I'm open to, thank you so much. And
Firstly, let me introduce myself first. And my name is Bagas Emas. I'm a medical student from Erlangga University, Indonesia. And it's a great honor for me to be here today and to have the opportunity to present at this distinguished neuroscience congress. And in this session, I will be presenting a case report titled Tetralogy of Fallot with sepsis-induced coagulopathy in case of spontaneous intracerebral hemorrhage and subarachnoid hemorrhage. And in this case, illustrates a complex and rare intersection between congenital heart disease, systemic infection, coagulation disturbance, and acute neurological catastrophe. I hope this presentation can contribute to further discussion on multidisciplinary approach in managing such critically ill patients. And to begin, allow me to provide a brief background to frame the context of this case. Tetralogy of Fallot is a congenital cardiac anomaly characterized by four key anatomical features. First, pulmonary stenosis. Second, right ventricular hypertrophy. Third, ventricular septal defect. And fourth, an overriding aorta. And also, tetralogy of Fallot accounts for approximately 5% until 10% of all congenital heart defects, making it one of the most common forms of cyanotic congenital heart disease. For the case presentation, a 5 years, 9 months old patient present in emergency department, a referral from the community health center with decreased consciousness and shortness of breath. And the patient had a history of Tetralogy of Fallot with symptoms including dizziness, headache, and vomiting 3 times with yellowish content, then followed by extremities weakness. And in 2022, the patient was scheduled to undergo total corrective surgery for the tetralogy of Fallot. However, due to the limited healthcare facilities and logistical challenge, particularly because the patient resides in a remote area far from centralized medical centers, the surgery was postponed. And the CT scan stated below showed an intracerebral hemorrhage. A well-defined hyperdense area is noted in the left frontal lobe, consistent with a large intracerebral hematome. And hyperdensities are also observed within the sulci and sylvian fissures, suggestive of subarachnoid hemorrhage. There is a significant midline shift toward the left side, indicating mass effect due to the volume of the hematome. The patient was scheduled to undergo a trepanation procedure to evacuate the hematome. However, despite surgical intervention, the patient's condition progressively deteriorated or worsening in the postoperative period and ultimately resulted in death. Now we have reviewed the clinical presentation and radiological finding of the patient. Let us move to the discussion section where we will explore the underlying pathophysiology behind this complex presentation. So children with congenital heart disease are more susceptible to infections than the other normal children. This is because there is increasing risk of complication due to the decreased granulocyte activity against bacterial infection. T and B lymphocyte levels, undifferentiated T cells, complement system, and increased suppressor T cells function activity is suppressed. This immune activity profile is clinically relevant as it increases morbidity when exposed to common pathogen. Therefore, in infants with congenital heart disease have an increased risk of sepsis. Decision-making in this case in diagnosing sepsis is based on the SOFA score or sequential organ failure assessment, and it requires a minimum of 2 points to indicate sepsis in an individual. The SOFA score assessment includes partial pressure of oxygen, fraction inspired oxygen, mechanical ventilation, platelet count, Glasgow Coma Scale, bilirubin, mean arterial pressure, and serum creatinine levels. The patient scored 7. The patient also experienced sepsis-induced coagulopathy or SIC. It was diagnosed by criteria set by the International Society on Thrombosis and Hemastosis. Diagnosis of disseminated intravascular coagulation and SIC. It is confirmed on platelet count, PTT, and SOFA score. A score of 4 or above indicates is IC, and in this patient, the patient score is 5. And the occurrence of sepsis and SIC in spontaneous ICH or intracerebral hemorrhage in patients with congenital heart disease correlates with each other. And in intracerebral hemorrhage can result from coagulopathy caused by sepsis and various manifestation of congenital heart disease. In the SIC or sepsis-induced coagulopathy can lead to hemostasis imbalance, and sepsis can cause septic emboli originating from infection, complicating the systemic vascular system. Large bacterial inoculum form in vulnerable blood vessel area, such as heart valve, thrombus growth. This thrombi can break into smaller particle and distribute through the systemic bloodstream, potentially causing septic cerebral emboli and complication like say hemorrhage. Well, the TOF or tetralogy of Fallot, allowing the right to left shunting, the right to left shunting occurs due to the pressure difference between the right and the left side of the heart. In normal VSD or ventricular septal defect case, there should be a left to right shunt, but in COF or tetralogy of Fallot, the pulmonal stenosis caused RVOTO or right ventricular outflow obstruction. Therefore, the pressure gradient change with the right side has a higher pressure than the left sided. This right to left shunting allows emboli to enter the arterial circulation without passing through the lungs, termed paradoxical emboli and thrombosis. And understanding the pathophysiological basis of spontaneous hemorrhagic stroke in patients with untreated congenital heart defect highlight how structural cardiac abnormalities can initiate a cascade of systemic pathological processes. This connection underscores the broader impact of congenital heart defects beyond the cardiovascular system. Therefore, spontaneous hemorrhagic stroke in patients with untreated congenital heart defects necessitates an early diagnosis and treatment, as the condition cause other complications that lead to severe systemic effect beyond the cardiovascular system. And thank you for your attention for this topic. I hope this explanation provides a clearer understanding of the complex interplay between congenital heart defects and their systemic consequence. Should you have any further question or require additional information, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
I am working as Associate Professor and HOD in the Department of Psychology in Karnataka. I have taken a self-research in the field of parapsychology, which is related to the quantum physics. Okay. The title is Conscious Connection. Conscious Connection, that is the topic. Actually, my theme is consciousness and psycho-electromagnetic waves, a hypothetical exploration of the unified interaction of energy and reality. So first of all, the physics and psychology, they are totally different subject. One is a physical one, the psychology is invisible or metaphysical one. Okay. Unless you know the science of psychology, no one is ready to agree with the concept of parapsychology, because in the recent world, the quantum mechanics as well as quantum physics, it is playing a very significant role in research field, even related to the other branches of science. So according to the proponents of physicalism and reductionism and materialism and functionalism, and moreover even computationalism, argued that conscious experience emerges as a property of complex computations in networks of brain neurons. According to these perspectives, consciousness is regarded as a higher order effect that arises from lower level or non-conscious entities. In second stage, that is according to the Cartesian dualists, argue that consciousness cannot be accommodated within current or future scientific frameworks. They hold that consciousness and physical matter are fundamentally separate and irreconcilable.
Sorry to
And
interrupt, sir. Can you please share your presentation?
reductionism and computationalism argued that conscious experience emerges as a property of complex computation in network of brain neuron. So according to these perspectives, consciousness is regarded as higher order effect that arises from lower level non-conscious entities. In second stage, consciousness cannot be accommodated within current or future scientific frameworks. They hold that consciousness and physical matter are fundamentally separate and irreconcilable. And finally, that is modern era. What we are speaking about the modern theory of either physics or quantum physics as well as psychology, they propose that consciousness is fundamental and cannot be broken down in simpler components, much like essential physical properties like mass, spin, or change. And consciousness or its proto-conscious elements is inherently present even in the simplest entities, which may causes phenomena, nature, or subjective experience, which is called qualia. This perspective sees consciousness as a fundamental aspect of universe a concept of sometimes referred to as pan-protopsychism. The 20th century saw significant advancement in both computation and cognitive psychology. At the same time, progress in string theory, that is quantum field theory, quantum geometry, and related areas have led to the development of various streams. They describe the fundamental structure of the physics. So, as you know, our five senses seek a reference of our reference. The human being has five senses, and with them, he perceives and experiences his reality. In order to communicate properly, the continual sequential rearrangements of reality, agreements have been made to realize uniformity in our communications that is related to the law of physics, such as mass, length, time, electric current, thermodynamic temperature, amount of substance, and luminous intensity, the data processing and transmission delay between awareness and event is for the human body about 200 milliseconds. That is the reference of our reference. It is mentioned here. Lives means the past and present and the future. As per the universe law, time does not exist. It only exists as an emerging memory experience in our consciousness. One of the abilities of our consciousness is to create an image of the future inferred of the signals received from the past. Later, one of the abilities of our consciousness is to create an image of the future inferred of the signals received from the past. In our minds, the progress of time and so history is created by using only 5% of these data received and stocked up. This almost deniable amount of information together is forming our subjective reality. Later, subjective reality, that is the second aspect or concept. An individual being can be regarded as the center of reception of signals, the observer. Around him or her is a span of incoming data. We could imagine, of course, an infinity of space around the observer, each span with a different radius and representing a different past of incoming stimulating signals. The minimum radius of a span around the consciousness of the observer at which the data are aware is at a distance of 1/5 second. This distance represents the minimum data processing transformation delay that is called DPTD between the reception of the incoming signal via our senses and the conscious causal awareness of the event observed. Later, imagine the signals from a faraway past as deep blue and the younger signals as a deep red. The span is then compared with a microcosm soft former. In the next slide, you can see here subjective reality. It is in a picture format. So here we can see how the physics, the relationship of physics and psychology is entangled in the topic. Then conscious forms of subjective simultaneities. All the subjective simultaneity space, that is S that represent the subjective realities with their communal cutting circle are forming together a form mutual experienced realities. In next slide, you can watch it. Yeah. All of the conscious of humanity on earth forming a new center of the form of human consciousness. This is the this is the sphere of simultaneity of history around us. That is why we all share the same history, the objective simultaneity. Next, here in this picture, you can see that is absolute simultaneity. What is the meaning of absolute simultaneity? It refers to the experimental establishment of, of coincidence of two or more events in time at different locations in space in a manner agreed upon by all observers. Here, as indicated above, objective simultaneity is dependent on the specific moment in timeline and communal cuttings circles of these individual pairs at that time. This specific moment can be described as a slit from block universe. Space is not needed here as a material medium. Our memories are timeless and spaceless. They are result of the data perceived on the simultaneity pair. The absolute ether that the absolute ether that Einstein introduced later to explain or Newton is material medium needed to explain material absolute simultaneities. In our perception, this ether is of a different quality because consciousness is the origin of matter. The ether connecting entanglement as a spooky action at a distance is of a non-comprehensible light. The distance in time is emerging only in our consciousness. The ether of consciousness is our belief. Next, probability. The question can be, was consciousness created by matter or matter created by consciousness? That is a significant concept as well as major question. Once we make a division line between reductionist causal deterministic universal, that is RCDU, and the dimension where causality is not existing, the one behind the until now accepted Planck length and time, where there is no cause and event relation, where we enter a dimension where every probability is a possible reality. We call this dimension as total simultaneity. Next, the origin of RCDU, which is TS, might be described as a singularity everywhere present in time. We can go back in the past, of course, in the direction of what is accepted as Big Bang, but we can also divide every RCDU moment until its most little unit, the flank time. This moment is the eternal non-causal singularity moment and contains the whole past and future as experienced in an RCDU moment. The Big Bang in this interpretation is a non-existing moment in our RCDU because it is singularity beyond the Planck time is in TS. TS is constituted of a small a means probability. Later, we can speak about or we can think of the possible quantum histories or Hawking Hartley interpretation as well as total simultaneity interpretation in the next slide. That is figure 2A and figure 2B. they are explaining about the reality and consciousness. Here you can observe how figure 1, figure 2a and figure 2b both are similar as per the law of physics or quantum mechanics. The next is time travel. Then what is the meaning of time travel? Before that, once again, I would like to share the meaning of timetable as per this figure 2a and figure 2b principles. In the picture, it is very clear. Time travel, the splitting in the original MWI theory goes only forward in time, not backwards in our conception. It is possible that our consciousness activates probability that were already a piece in our causal past memories or were part of memory points of other participants. Should this mean that time travel is possible? That's once again major question to everyone. Now we come to the quantum physics means entropy. All of you know about this entropy. Okay, here you can quantum physics, entropy, free will, they are playing the major role in my research experience. Entropy is the thermodynamic property toward equilibrium, average, homogenization. Entropy is a pure causal interpretation of the past and is defined phenomenological by the second law of thermodynamics. Entropy is an expression of disorder and randomness. The higher the entropy, the higher the disorder. TS is compared to our RCDU Chavos, the highest entropy. Then I would like to brief about free will. What is the meaning of free will according to the metaphysics of parapsychology? Free will can be easily understood and accepted in this interpretation because it is our consciousness that chooses between an infinity of probability in TS. Later, the related aspect is coming to the part 2 that is related to the quantum physics. That is the another part of my research topic. Here you can see the relationship between quantum collapse and consciousness is reconsidered under the assumption that quantum collapse is an objective dynamical process. It is very true. One should agree. Reason here, consciousness is the most familiar phenomenon. There are two distinct processes relating to the phenomena. One is the objective matter processes such as the neural process in the brain, and the other is the concomitant subjective conscious experience. So emergentism asserts that consciousness appears as an emerging result of complex matter process. It is generally accepted that an essentially separation of consciousness and matter will preclude any real integration of consciousness with the present scientific picture of the physical world, and panpsychism and emergentism are two main positions that can the integration. Thus, we must decide whether and how consciousness emerges from mere matter or whether consciousness is fundamental property of the matter. Later, in this paper, means in my research paper, we will mainly study the possible physical effects of consciousness. The new analysis may have some brief implication for the nature of consciousness, especially it may provide a promising solution to the hard problem of consciousness under the assumption that quantum collapse is an objective dynamical process. We argue that the conscious observer can distinguish the definite states and the quantum superposition, while the usual physical measuring device without consciousness cannot do. This result implies that the causal efficacies of consciousness may exist when considering the existence of quantum collapse, and thus consciousness is not reducible or emergent but a new fundamental property of matter. Lastly, we also propose some experimental schemes to test the predicted quantum effects of consciousness, consciousness, and physical measurement. We will first analyze the role of consciousness in physical measurement process. Physical measurements generally consist of two properties: the physical interaction between the observed object and measuring devices. Second one is psychophysical interaction between the measuring device and the observer. In some special situation, measurement may be a direct interaction between the observed object and the observer. Here, a quantum effect of consciousness that will be interrupted. Quantum theory is most basic physical theory of nature everybody knows. It is generally expected that a complete quantum theory should describe the projection as a dynamic or the dynamical collapse process of the wave function and provide a unified evolution law of the wave function, revised quantum dynamics, and many world theory are two main alternatives to a complete quantum theory. Here we will discuss the possible quantum effects of consciousness in the framework of revised quantum dynamics. The next, it is just the distinct quantum effect of consciousness that result in the different outputs for man and machine. This quantum physical test can be used to test the existence of consciousness and further differentiate man and machine. It is shown in the figure 1. Here you can see a quantum physical method to distinguish between man and machine. You can keenly observe in set of rules result more systematically how a quantum physical method to distinguish of an individual consciousness and how it works like a machine. Here, consciousness is a fundamental property of matter. Consciousness has a basic quantum effect that is lacking for mere matter. This means that consciousness has causal efficacies in the physical world, and the physical world is not causally closed without consciousness. It is very true. And later, you can see the next part of the quantum physics or quantum mechanics, that is a unified theory of matter and consciousness. Since consciousness is a fundamental property of matter, it is expected that a unified theory of matter and consciousness will essentially comprise two parts: the psychophysical principle or corresponding principle between conscious content and the matter state, and the other is the complete quantum evaluation of matter state. Here we can touch between psychology and quantum physics. Some suggested experiment, they say that in the following we will propose some experimental schemes to test our theoretical analysis. The experiments can be conducted using human beings in the present research, that is control experiment. So I would like to switch over my slide to the next one. Consciousness is a fundamental property of matter, a unified theory of matter and consciousness. Some suggested experiments are as under, that is quantum perception experiment 1, 2, then perceptions entanglement experiment 1 and 2 respectively. I would like to brief about the quantum perception experiment 1. Here, a control experiment inputs some photons with a given frequency to the eyes of the subject, record the conscious time of the subject through EEG or his oral description. In quantum perception experiment 1, what we are doing is input one branch of each superposition state to the eyes of the subject and let the other branch freely spread. Test whether the subject perceives the photons during the normal conscious time. That is coming under here, means quantum perception experiment 1. Quantum perception experiment 2 is little different from the earlier. Input both branches of each superposition state to the eyes of the subject from the same direction. Test whether the subject perceives the photons during the normal conscious time. The next one is perception entanglement experiment. It is directly interacted with psychology as well as quantum mechanics. Input the two branches of each superposition state to the eyes of the two independent subjects respectively. Test whether the subjects perceive the photons during the normal conscious time. If we find that the subject perceive the photons after a time interval longer than the normal conclusion time in any case of the above experiments, after eliminating the experimental errors, then we will have confirmed the existence of the usual condition that can result in the quantum effects of consciousness. In addition, it is suggested that the subjects in the above experiment should include 3 independent groups at least. The subjects in the first group are in normal state. The subjects in the second group are in meditation state. The subjects in the third group are in going state, means that's deep state. The final part of the experiment is related to the perception entanglement experiment 2. Here, input the two branches of each superposition state to the eyes of the two independent and isolated subjects respectively. Then stimulate one of the subjects using flashes or visual patterns at random intervals. It may be related to the audible, or it may be related to the visual, or it may be related to the tactile sensation. My research is related to the tactile sensation on my any given subject. Record his evoked potential and the corresponding brain electrical activities of the other subject. Test whether there exists statistical relevance between them. At the same time, ask the unstimulated subject whether he or she has some kind of conscious perceptions relating to the stimulations which is stimulated by the experimenter, means principal investigator. The appearance of the statistical relevance will confirm the existence of the unusual condition as well as its resulting quantum effect of the consciousness. Then finally, methodology. In the methodology, we are using regularly the 3 aspects that is related to the quantum physics, as you know, brain imaging telepathy, then MRI imaging, brain to the brain communication. So this is the methodology what I have been used in my research topic. My research task is, it is possible to consciously and more effectively influence an individual's mind by remote way, allowing them to experience a more natural state during the transition between experimenter as well as the subject. It is physically possible. Here, I would like to tell something about how psychology or how parapsychology works in the field of quantum physics. Brain imaging of telepathy. Here, to investigate telepathy using functional brain imaging, the study involves selecting participants, including individuals claiming telepathic abilities or non-abilities. Individuals also considered to our experiment, and a control group, ensuring they are neurologically and psychiatrically healthy. And in the second state, that is called functional imagining techniques such as MRI, electroencephalograph, or MEG are used to monitor and compare the brain activity of both participants, both experimenter as well as the subject. The goal is to identify neural patterns or synchronization in brain activity that occur during the alert telepathic events to enhance reliability. The study includes control conditions where no stimuli are sent to differentiate actual telepathic signal from chance or noise. And final method of adopting is MRI imaging. Participants are fitted with a highly density EEG cap equipped with multiple electrodes to capture neural activity from different brain regions, focusing focusing on areas associated with language processing, such as Broca and wrinkle areas of the brain. The experiment involves presenting participants with visual, auditor, and tactile cues to prompt specific imaging speech tasks while ensuring a controlled and distraction free environment. My topic is completely related to the tactile cues, not the rest visual or auditory. And finally, the last one is brain to brain communication. As you know, the methodology of brain to brain communication involves integrating advanced neuroimaging and brain stimulation techniques to facilitate direct information exchange between two individuals. Typically, one participant means the sender is exposed to the specific stimuli such as visible or audible or even tactile images, and their brain activity is recorded using techniques like EEG or functional near infrared spectroscopy. The recorded neural patterns are processed and translated into a format interpretable by a brain stimulation device such as transcranial magnetic stimulation or transcranial direct current stimulation. Nowadays, these are more popular in the field of parapsychology as well as quantum mechanics. This device then delivers modulated stimuli to the brain of the second participant, that is the subject or the receiver, aiming to replicate neural activity patterns that correspond to the sender's experience. Data analysis focus on synchronizing neural signals and evaluating the accuracy of the transmitted information, providing insights into the potential for the direct neural information transfer. So these are the core aspects of my research, which is related to the quantum physics, how it is playing a significant role in the field of parapsychology. The research task here is consciously and lively. It is possible to influence an individual's conscious mind can be remotely communicated and thereby to make him experience during the halfway stage between full waking consciousness and sleep in more natural manner. And it is experimentally possible to superimpose psycho-electromagnetic waves on any individual consciousness, thereby to make him experience during the halfway stage between full waking consciousness and sleep. It may be during night time or during night time. I used both. Means Asia, Asian time and Pacific time. I used both timing setup, and I was succeeded in the present research demonstration. Here, what interests me is during this experimental phenomena, which brain centers are activated in both the experimenter and the subject who are being experienced. That is my curiosity, or that is my research related thing, which is to be known by everyone. Thank you so much.
Добрый день, уважаемые организаторы, участники, гости конференции. Меня зовут Петросян Светлана Николаевна. Я работаю в Международном инновационном университете города Сочи. Спасибо за возможность познакомить ученых и практиков с результатами своих исследований. Вашему вниманию представляется доклад на тему «Методика личностный профиль субъектной активности, теоретические основы и возможные области применения».
Personality's agentic activity profile, or PAP inventory, was created as the main measuring tool of the agentic dynamic approach that we are developing, which is focused on the self-organization processes of the personality positioning system of the agent. Let's start with the theoretical provisions, which are represented on this slide. We propose to consider the agentic and personality-related entities as a dual unity of mental processes that differ functionally, where the agent is the bearer of internal integrity and primary activity or content, and the personality-related entity represents specific forms of manifestation of the agent's activity or personality positions. The key concept of our research was the concept of disposition as mutually conditioned positioning in the meander dyad. Personality development in dyadic relationships is regulated by experiences of danger or safety of interaction, or in other words, by the presence or absence of an external threat. In reply to an external threat, two responses arise in the individual psychic field: active, aggressive, and passive, fearful. The personality identifies itself with one position and projects the other outward, for example, the domination and submission disposition. We propose to call such mutually conditioned positions a disposition. This implies the presence of two opposite poles of positioning that are immanently and simultaneously present in the psyche of an individual, and the readiness to respond and behave in a certain way. So it's the classical understanding of the term disposition. So disposition is reflected in the psyche in the form of an intrapersonal dispositional entity and determines the nature of interaction and the dynamics of relationship development. The personality positioning system is formed through age-specific cycles, through interaction with significant others, and through taking decisions in relation to age-specific developmental tasks. The disposition poles are bound by a dialectical contradiction, that is, the unity of mutually exclusive opposites underlying development. The PAP tests both personality positions and projection systems, acting as a measuring tool for quality of inclusion in environment and a measure of potential behavior in coexistence. So let's proceed with the description of the PAP inventory. This is a multi-scale questionnaire, the results of which can be presented in the form of an individual personality profile of agentic activity. The inventory consists of 18 scales and 220 questions grouped into scales, corresponding to coexistential positional dichotomies, organized on the principle of bipolarity. So we see it's basic aggression, basic fear, indifference, uselessness, invasion, infantilism or defenselessness, domination and submission, control, controllability, blame, guilt, judge, defendant, might, incapability. And 2 more scales have been included in the questionnaire that reflect the specifics of responding to the dominating and controlling position in the dichotomies of domination, sabotaging, submission, and control, sabotaging, controllability, where sabotage represents hidden opposition to the will and intentions of another person. The scales basic aggression, basic fear measure positioning that arises as a fixed primary psychophysiological reaction in the form of aggression or fear to a hostile impulse from the environment. At each age stage, this disposition is filled with specific psychological content. The scales indifference, uselessness measure the level of positioning focused on detachment and contact relationships. Indifference diagnoses the manifestation of one's own detachment, and uselessness is a reaction to the partner's detachment. Invasion infantilism scales measure positioning in relation to personal boundaries, where invasion is focused on violating other people's boundaries, and infantilism on the permeability of the individual's own boundaries. The scales domination submission measure positioning focused on domination or submission, as well as passive resistance to external domination, a sabotage. The scales control controllability measure positioning focused on internal or external locus of control, as well as passive resistance to external control, a sabotage. The scales blame guilt measure positioning that attributes negative impact to an external source or to oneself. The scales judge defendant measure positioning that gives the right to make an opinion or judgment to oneself or to an external source, partner, authority. The scales might and capability measure positioning aimed at self-realization and self-implementation in society, or at personal impotence. What has been said is summarized on this slide. Let's have a look at it for 5 more seconds, just to digest. When it comes to statistics, here we have presented the main psychometric indicators of reliability and validity of the PAP inventory. Now let's consider the theoretic capabilities of the PAP inventory. Paths of self-organization of the personality positioning system of the agent. This figure shows attractor structures or stable functional states of the agent's personality positioning system. The factorization of the inventory allowed us to identify 4 sets of such attractor structures or types of agentic activity. The infantile type, here blue, is represented by the positions of basic fear, infantilism, submission, controllability, guilt, defendant, and capability. The aggressive type, red, by basic aggression, basic fear, uselessness, invasion, blame. The sabotaging type, here yellow, by indifference, sabotaging controllability, sabotaging submission. And the mighty type, here light violet, by domination, control, judge, and might. The agentic activity types receive their names according to the most evident position of the scale. From the viewpoint of synergetics, an attractor structure is both a process, a sequence of system formation, and a result, a stable functional state of the system. Since the stable functional state of the personality positioning system of the agent determines the typical nature and vector of the agent's activity, such systems receive the name types of agentic activity. The evolution of the personality positioning system of the agent is represented by the sequence infantile, aggressive, sabotaging, mighty types, depending on the growth of the agent's indicator ego strength. The correlation of agentic activity types with this indicator was revealed when comparing the data of PAP and BIV inventories. The algorithms for the formation of personality positioning systems thus are implemented depending on the manifestation of the first 2 dispositions of the preconscious level of formation, namely, the evident basic fear position further prevents the exit from the state of fusion, does not allow one to break away from the defender, and predetermines the manifestation of the infantilism position, a dependent type of relationship, and further travel around passive personality positions, responses, submission, controllability, guilt, defendant, with an exit to incapability. The evident basic aggression, basic fear leads to ambivalence of experiences responsible for basic security, maintains a chronic stress reaction, and leads to the uselessness position, since any signal of the mother's detachment or approach is dramatized, and implies an exit into the invasion position where the personality gets stuck, constantly ready for defense, attacking, torn apart by emotions, and having no resource for further development, from subsequent positions emerging only to the position of blame. The evident position of indifference leads to a stable response in the positions of sabotaging, domination, and control, without further movement towards genuine self-realization, which is here replaced by hindering external influences to preserve comfort and personal sovereignty. And the balance of the initial positions predetermines the movement of the personality towards the might position, through the positions of domination, control, and judge, that allow one to set goals and move towards their implementation. What has just been said is summarized on this slide. Let's have a look at this for 5 more seconds. And now we come to the the types of agentic activity within the Big Five space. This figure shows portraits of agentic activity types in the space of the main factors of the BFI2 inventory. The study of the relationship between the types of agentic activity and the main factors and facets allowed us to compile descriptive characteristics of each of the agentic activity types based on strong and medium strength correlation or relationships according to Cohen's classification. So the infantile type can be characterized as introverted and prone to neuroticism, unassertive, non-energetic, anxious, depressive, emotionally labile, lacking creative imagination. The aggressive type is characterized as non-agreeable and prone to neuroticism, lacking compassion, trust, respect for people, and is depressive. The sabotaging type is non-agreeable and non-conscientious, lacking compassion for people, disorganized, and irresponsible. The mighty type is extroverted and conscientious, assertive, energetic, well-organized, responsible, not prone to depression, and possesses creative imagination. The agentic activity types are manifested in the FFM space, forming certain dual combinations of leading traits. It is worth noting that such combinations represent a chain, where one of the traits is characteristic of 2 agentic activity types at once, being as it were a connective link. The vector introversion, neuroticism, and non-agreeableness or hostility to non-conscientiousness or conscientiousness to extroversion reflects the generalized strategy or the general design of agentic activity development from infantile introversion through conflict methods of interaction to mighty extroversion as active human inclusion in the world. It is noteworthy that the genesis of agentic activity types is associated with a linear increase in the ego strength and an almost linear decrease in the level of neuroticism, up to negatively significant indicators for the mighty type. In the mighty type of agentic activity, a qualitative leap occurs. Positioning loses its protective nature, the agent begins to generate his or her own meanings, not related to self-preservation tasks, becomes oriented towards self-realization. Thus, we observe the emergence of new levels of organization of the agentic activity type, or new attractor structures, which reflects the process of transition from one type of functioning of the personality positioning system to another, depending on the increase in the ego strength. So this is summarized on this slide. Let's have a look at this. Let's move to the differences in the personality positioning of men and women. Figure 3 shows comparison of the average male and female profiles in T-scores. The study involved 414 men and 808 women aged 17 to 87 years. The factor structure is similar in male and female samples and repeats the previously identified structure. In general, women show higher indicators for all passive position. positions. Men are more energetic, independent in thinking, and self-confident. And this represents the positions of basic aggression, judge, and might. Women are generally more dominating, prone to blame, prone to violate personal boundaries, infantile, and vulnerable. And this is manifested in the positions of domination, blame, invasion, and infantilism. Indicators of variability are significantly higher in men in relation to the positions of basic aggression, indifference, domination, sabotaging, submission, blame, and judge. The most significant differences are noted for the positions of basic aggression and judge, biological activity, and independence of mind. Both of these positions, men have a higher indicator with a higher variability. The positions of infantilism and sabotaging submission in men are much less evident than in women, and at the same time are more variable, due to the fact that the first psychophysiological orienting responses in the form of fear or aggression to a hostile impulse of the environment are different in men and women. This leads to the formation of different vectors of their agentic activity. Men are more active and variable. Women are more passive and conservative. This correlates with the provisions of Gerda Kant's evolutionary theory of gender, according to which the male gender is the operative subsystem of the population, and the female gender is the conservative subsystem, which is the basis of their evolutionary plasticity. As can be seen from Figure 3, the male and female profiles are not just symmetrical with respect to the straight line, they have polar dispositional structures. So the positioning of men and women is not only different, it is complementary. This is the summary. Other psychodiagnostic capabilities of the PAP inventory can be seen from the study of peculiarities of the average agentic activity profile for people with alcohol addiction and tuberculosis patients. The study was conducted in 2018 on the basis of the centers in Sochi, Russia, for the treatment and rehabilitation of patients with alcohol addiction, and in 2019 on the basis of the tuberculosis state clinic in Sochi. Figure 4 shows the average profile of a personality with alcohol addiction in comparison with the infantile and average agentic activity profiles. The characteristics of alcohol addiction profile are the highest points at guilt and defendant positions. The lowest point is the judge position. The personality experiences guilt without fully bearing responsibility. The beginning of the profile resembles the aggressive profile, and after infantilism position, it resembles the infantile profile. The key developmental factors for this personality is the prohibition on separation, meaning actions caring or dominating mother, and authoritarian parenting style and family origin. Figure 5 shows average agentic activity profile for people with tuberculosis in comparison to the mighty agentic activity profile and the average agentic activity profile. The characteristics of the tuberculosis profile are as follows. The highest points at uselessness and blame positions. The lowest point is the might position. This profile is almost a mirror image of a mighty profile, or an antipode, with the exception of the blame position, which is strongly accentuated. This individual is more aggressive, blaming, and sabotaging than average, and it demonstrates the loss of might, feeling of control over one's life. The key developmental factors are aggressiveness and inability to influence life course in desired direction. The comparative characteristics of profiles of individuals with alcohol addiction and with tuberculosis are shown on this slide. In alcohol addiction, basically the infantile orientation is somatized, and tuberculosis, the aggressive orientation is somatized with loss of ability to manage one's life. Now we come to the examples of interpretation of individual agentic activity profiles, which represent also the psychodiagnostic capabilities of our inventory. Figure 6 shows the comparison of the profile of female subjects with the average female profile from the standard sample. The female subject is a woman, 42 years old. You will see also the factor scores. This profile is diagnosed as sabotaging mighty. The psychological portrait of this individual is pronounced independence, sabotaging mighty profile with prevalence of basic aggression over basic fear, marked by strong character resistant to manipulation. So it's demonstrated through reduced blame guilt disposition, capable of good business contacts built on interest. The person quickly exits uninteresting relationships, possesses independent thinking, marked by judge position, experiences difficulties in independent work due to low susceptibility. So the recommendation is teamwork in small working groups. The results of the study indicate that the PAP inventory can be used as a theoretic and psychodiagnostic tool in a large-scale psychological and sociological research. Also, the PAP inventory can be used as a psychodiagnostic tool in relation to both individuals and groups, or group agent. Separate positions of the profile can make starting points for specific-oriented therapeutic impact. So thank you for your attention, and we're ready to answer your questions, if any.
Good afternoon, dear guests. I am really glad to see you all today. Today I'd like to talk about ketogenic diet. So, ketogenic diet in the treatment of drug-resistant epilepsy in children in the Russian Federation. About 20% of patients experiencing drug-resistant epilepsy have indication for neurosurgical treatment, but still surgical treatment remains ineffective for more than one-third of patients. In the remaining 80% of cases, the disease progresses and leads to progressive cognitive impairments, profound disability, and social disadaptation. Irreversible cognitive impairments are formed within 2 years as a result of uncontrolled course of epilepsy. The impairments resist even if they are managed in the future. The ketogenic diet as a tool in managing epilepsy is used worldwide: Europe, North and South America, Asia, Africa, and Australia. You may find the name and the address of our medical center on a live website. In 2002, the ketogenic diet was introduced into Russian medicine with the help of the joint work of neurologists and nutritionists. The Child Moscow Research Hospital Scientific and Practical Center for Specialized Medical Care for Children, named after Wojny Yesenetsky, remains the only medical center in Russia that has a ketogenic diet patent. A ketogenic diet ratio is the ratio when the amount of carbohydrates sharply decreases and the amount of fat. On the other hand, increases energy metabolism switches from carbohydrate to lipid, which leads to the accumulation of ketone bodies, such as oxyacetate and beta-hydroxybutyrate. As a result, we have an anticonvulsant effect. The ketogenic diet is prescribed in any form of drug-resistant epilepsy, as well as in other specific metabolic disorders, such as GLUT1 deficiency, dehydrogenase complex deficiency, congenital phosphofructokinase deficiency, and so on. Nosologies with the highest effectiveness on the diet therapy: Angelman and Rett syndromes, Dravet, Dose, and Lennox-Gastaut syndromes, febrile seizure, infantile epileptic spasm syndrome, Ohtahara syndrome, tuberous sclerosis, refractory and superrefractory status epilepticus, glucose transporter protein 1 deficiency syndrome, pyruvate dehydrogenase deficiency. Areas of the ketogenic diet application that are being discussed besides epilepsy: acne, polycystic ovary syndrome, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's disease, glucose transporter protein 1 deficiency, tumor, diabetes, obesity, Parkinson's disease, migraine headache, motor neuron disease, and autism. Contraindications for the ketogenic diet: indications for resective epilepsy surgery relative some mitochondrial disease, pyruvate carboxylase deficiency, free fatty acids transportation and oxidation disorders, congenital or acquired carnitine deficiency, porphyrias, and organic aciduries. Somatic illnesses, cholelithiasis and renal calculus disease, congenital heart defect with hemodynamic disorders, cardiomyopathies, arrhythmias, primary electrical heart disorders, chronic aspiration syndrome, inability of the family to organize the diet therapy, concurrent use of propofol during sedation. Ketogenic diet variations. Classical ketogenic diet consumption of animal fats and oils. Medium chain triglyceride diet. From 30 to 60% of fat is represented by medium chain triglycerides. Modified Atkins diet and low glycemic index treatment are not in use in case of congenital metabolic disorders at the initial stage since 2002. New variations of ketogenic diet are more attractive due to their relative simplicity of organization. They do not require strict dietary calculations and restrictions. However, their evidence base is not that wide. As a rule, such variations of ketogenic diet are mostly prescribed for adolescents and adults, with differences in clinical efficacy between classical ketogenic diet and MCT diet not found. Keto Calculator. This is software that simplifies calculations, allows users to make timely adjustments to a child's diet. The software is based on food nutrient database. More than 600 patients aged from 4 months for 18 years with different variation of drug-resistant epilepsy are being observed by our specialists. All these patients don't have any neurological, somatic or nutritional contraindications for their ketogenic diet. It was not earlier than 3 months from the beginning of the diet therapy when the effectiveness of the ketogenic diet would be improved. Effectiveness of ketogenic diet on epileptic seizures. The study includes a group of 600 children. 114 children had a 100% effect. 126 children had an effect rate of more than 75%. 18 children had side effects. 162 children had no effects. Our data does not differ from the data of the rest of the world. The most pronounced effect was observed in case of myoclonic seizure, absence, myoclonic atonic seizure, epileptic spasms. The ketogenic diet leads to positive effects on motor and mental functions in 94% of cases. Self-care, hygiene, and fine motor skills improvement, decreased ataxia, improved speech, memory retention, and communication skills are noted during the study. As a result, we can see life quality improvement, even if anticonvulsant effects are minimal. Glucose transporter type 1 deficiency syndrome is a rare genetic disorder with predominant central nervous system involvement. The disease is caused by a defect in SLC2A1 gene, first described by Professor De Viva in 1991. More than 150 mutations in SLC2A1 gene, causing GLUT1 deficiency syndrome, have been described. De Viva disease is characterized by early progressive encephalopathy, anti-epileptic drug-resistant epilepsy. Phenobarbital and diazepam deteriorate the patient's condition. Key clinical features are abnormal eye movements in infants, seizures, impaired psychomotor development, head growth retardation, movement disorders. Ketogenic diet is nowadays the only effective treatment for children with GLUT1. High fat and low carbohydrate ketogenic diet is accompanied by the formation of ketone bodies which are able to leak across the blood-brain barrier and provide alternative metabolism in the CNS. Thanks to ketogenic diet, we can control seizures, improve movement functions, have a positive effect on children's mental development in 95% of cases. The prognosis is favorable if the ketogenic diet is started in early age. Effectiveness of ketogenic diet in GLUT1 syndrome. A group of 31 children, 26 children had a 100% effect. 1 children had a 100% effect on ketogenic diet together with anti-epileptic drugs. 4 children had an effect rate of more than 75%. 2 children had no effects. Pyruvate dehydrogenase complex deficiency is a rare mitochondrial disorder. The symptoms are lactic acidosis, seizures, hyperammonemia, facial deformity, neurological disorders, abnormal brain structure, muscle abnormalities, infancy abnormalities, breathing difficulty, and fetal abnormalities. Ketogenic diet effectiveness in pyruvate dehydrogenase complex deficiency, a group of 3 children. A specific therapy for PDCD still has not been developed. However, an alternative source of energy for the patient alleviates the course of the disease. It's recommended to keep to diet to reduce the synthesis and accumulation of pyruvate, so the ketogenic diet is prescribed. Besides ketogenic diet, the children take thiamine, carnitine, and lipoic acid. All 3 children had a 100% improvement on ketogenic diet. Ketogenic diet effectiveness in status epilepticus management, a group of 5 children. All medical centers uses ketogenic diet to manage refractory and superrefractory status epilepticus. 3 children had refractory status epilepticus, 2 children had superrefractory status epilepticus. All 5 patients had pathogenic mutation leading to severe epileptic encephalopathy. All 5 children had a 100% improvement on ketogenic diet together with anti-epileptic drugs. Conclusion. The total ketogenic diet efficacy was 420 patients. It was 70%. A clear ketogenic diet efficacy in genetically determined forms of epilepsy, with from 50 to 100% effectiveness, was revealed. It was 82% of children. Ketogenic diet is an effective method pathogenic therapies in GLUT1 deficiency syndrome, deficiency of pyruvate dehydrogenase complex. It allows to reduce clinical manifestation, control seizures, improves psychomotor development and children's life quality. Ketogenic diet may be used to manage refractory and superrefractory status epilepticus. 94% of patients had motor and mental function improvements. 27% of patients experienced no effect. Ketogenic diet is a cost-effective therapy that reduces the cost to the state and the family. Qualified nutritionists and neurologists' participation is the key to success. Thank you for your attention. It's an honor for me to be here today. Have a great day.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Let me present you a clinical case of botulinotherapy of opisthothonus in pediatric practice. Opisthothonus is a pathological posture characterized by forced axial flexion of the trunk, neck muscles, and dystonic positioning of the limbs because of involuntary contraction of the extensor muscles. This extreme condition, in most cases, occurs suddenly, can be paroxysmal, prolonged, or may have a remitting character. Opisthothonus is a clinical symptom of a significant number of nosologies, which makes it difficult to collect epidemiological data. Because of this fact, there are still no comprehensive studies on this topic. Opisthothonus may appear at any stage of pathology. In some cases, it's the only symptom that allows to make correct diagnosis. We distinguish the following varieties of opisthothonus depending on the etiological factor: infection, poisoning, increased intracranial pressure, metabolic disturbances, disturbance of ontogenesis, neurodegenerative syndrome, and other causes. The table shows the main diseases specified on the etiological profile. This slide shows a table with the main etiological nosological units in pediatric practice, which are characterized by opisthothonus. With your permission, we will not dwell on them. The basis of pathological posture in opisthothonus is the concurrent contraction of agonist and antagonist muscle groups, together with diffuse increased muscle tone. This extreme condition is pathogenetically caused by an imbalance in the excitatory and inhibitory conductive pathways, innervating the involved muscle groups. Also, important aspect in the development of the pathological process is the dysregulation of secretion of inhibitory neurotransmitters, such as glycine and gamma-aminobutyric acid, and uncontrolled activity of alpha and gamma motor neurons. In most cases, opisthothonus is accompanied by following disorders: changes in qualitative and quantitative indicators of consciousness, up to coma, convulsive syndrome, symptomatology from the cranial nerves, dysphagia, pathological pupil reactions, pathology of the autonomous nervous system, in particular hypohidrosis, fever, tachycardia, cardiac arrhythmias, blood pressure fluctuations, respiratory dysfunctions, vomiting, pain syndrome, asthenia. Subsequently, this group of patients has a delay in general development with the formation of secondary contractures and bone deformities. They are characterized by the development of ulcers and pressure sores. Diagnostic pool in opisthothonus includes a number of examinations, both laboratory and instrumental, which make it possible to clarify the etiological factor and to correct the therapy. Laboratory methods are used to assess the functional state of the organ systems involved in the pathological process, as well as an assessment of the metabolic profile. In acute opisthothonus, routine laboratory examinations are supplemented by chemical and toxicological studies. Lumbar puncture is also performed for therapeutic and diagnostic purpose in order to exclude neuroinfection. Instrumental methods of investigation include ultrasound, radiological studies, as well as neuroimaging methods, computerized tomography, and magnetic resonance imaging. Ultrasound and radiological studies are used to exclude secondary pathological changes of internal organs and bone structures. Neuroimaging methods are used to detect anomalies of the central nervous system and pathologies causing increased intracranial pressure to clarify the nature of skeletal deformities. In some cases, neurospecialists are invited if specific etiological factors of opisthothonus are suspected, for example, psychiatrists, oncologists. Therapy of opisthothonus is primarily aimed to the cause of this extreme condition. We emphasize the following main approaches to treatment: etiological therapy, antibiotics, active vaccination against tetanus, rabies, replacement therapy for metabolic disorders, for example, Gaucher disease, pathogenetic therapy, deep brain stimulation for dystonia, intracerebral baclofen, botulinum therapy. Separative or symptomatic therapy include infusion therapy, fluid and electrolyte balance, ventilation, nutritional support, analgesic therapy, up to use of narcotic analgesics, rest to reduce the frequency of dystonic attacks. Botulinum therapists at our medical center are constantly expanding the clinical groups of nosologies for which botulinum toxin type A can be used. Just recently, we performed botulinum therapy on a child with opisthothonus. In the world practice, there is little experience in the use of botulinum therapy in this pathology. The only experience available to the medical community is presented by colleagues from Houston, USA. The main points of the scientific publication are shown on the slide. Let's look at a clinical case of botulinum toxin type A for opisthothonus. A 10-year-old boy who stays in an orphanage with a disability of childhood, observed for cerebral palsy, mixed spastic dyskinetic form with mobility level 5, manual ability level 5, eating ability level 5, communicative ability level 5 according to generally accepted scales. Unfortunately, the early life history is unknown because of the fact that the parents are deprived of parental rights. The child was admitted to the health care institution with complaints from the medical staff about the increase in dystonic attacks accompanied by anxiety, tachycardia. According to the severity of the condition, he was hospitalized in the intensive care unit. During the period of staying in the IC unit, a lot of public consultations were held in order to select a planned therapy for dystonic attacks. Gabapentin at a dose of 10 mg per kilogram per a day, with no effect. In connection with these complaints, titration of morphine was performed, also without significant clinical effect. Based on the available clinical data, the diagnosis established for the patient is progressive muscular dystonia with generalized attacks, persistent trismus of the masticatory muscles, torticollis, and increasing deformity of the bony skeleton. Concomitant diagnosis is structural epilepsy with bilateral seizures. Postsurgical status: bone plastic laminotomy, selective dorsal rhizotomy, corrective myotomies. Instead of routinely describing the neurological status, you can see everything on the presented photos. The child has neurogenic kyphoscoliosis, secondary left-sided thoracolumbar deformity, right-sided spastic hip subluxation, flexion contractures of the right hip and knee joints, extensor contractures of the left knee and hip joints, bilateral rigid equinopolarvarus deformity of the feet, flexion pronator contracture of the right elbow joint, pronator contracture of the left forearm, flexion contracture of both wrist joints. There was a decision to perform botulinum therapy in order to reduce spasticity, pain syndrome, decrease the number of dystonic attacks, increase the volume of passive movements, and facilitate orthopedic correction as well as palliative care. The target muscles were identified by palpation: musculus plenius capitis, musculus semispinalis cervicis, musculus paraspinalis on both sides. The total dose was 250 units according to recommendation of our American colleagues. This slide shows the paraspinal muscles that were injected, marked with red dots, and the actual process in IC unit. This slide shows pictures of the patient after 14 days and 1 month. On the first two photos, you can see a slight correction of the first position of the child's head and body. The changes are more clearly visualized 1 month after botulinum therapy. We also plan to continue further dynamic observation in the conditions of the orphanage. During dynamic observation, positive dynamics was observed in the post-injection period. Optimization of muscle tone of the target muscles. Medical staff noted simplification of child care. Slightly corrected forced head position by increasing the volume of passive movements at the cervical spine. Forced body position by changing the angle of spinal curvature. Reduction of pain syndrome severity from 4-5 points to 2-3 points according to FPS, as well as cessation of dystonic attacks. Thus, inclusion of regular sessions of local intramuscular injections of botulinum toxin type A into the scheme of complex therapy of opisthothonus with dystonic status phenomena is justified to achieve the following goals: reduction of the tone of the muscles involved in the pathological reflex tonic chain of deforming muscular dystonia, reduction or control of pain syndrome, acute and chronic, improving the quality of life of patients by reducing pain syndrome, facilitating orthopedic correction, and palliative care, as well as performing, if possible, the leading age-related activities within the functional class. Prevention of connective tissue degeneration of the muscles involved in the pathological process by increasing the amplitude of movements, duration of physical activity, and including them in the optimal pattern of motor acts. Prevention and avoidance of complications of opisthothonus, in particular dystonic storm. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions about the report, you can contact me by the email addresses indicated on the slide.
So my name is Mumtaz Sani, and I'm a specialty doctor in gastroenterology from the Lincoln County Hospital, United Kingdom. And today I'm presenting a rare case of malnutrition hepatitis in a patient who presented with anorexia nervosa. And this is the table of contents. So by definition, anorexia nervosa is an eating disorder that results in individuals excessive restriction of food intake. So most of these individuals have this morbid fear that they have a distorted body image, and they either restrict their food intake or they induce vomiting after eating. So there are different patterns of anorexia nervosa. It could be the behavioral pattern whereby they restrict their diet, they skip their meals, and sometimes they eliminate some classes of food. And we also have the binge purge cycle types of anorexia nervosa patients, whereby they eat in excess and they also take laxatives, or they purge in excess, they take laxatives, or they induce vomiting in excess. So these are, and it's noteworthy to say that anorexia nervosa is most common in women, and of course it's a mental health problem. The diagnosis is based on clinical evaluation, including assessments of food intake and psychological state. And the key diagnostic tools include the BMI and the psychological assessment. So as I said earlier, the subtypes include the restricting type, whereby the patient skips their meals, or sometimes they are very specific about the calories that they take in, and they have this morbid fear of weight gain, and they have this image of distortion of their body. They also most of the times perform in excessive physical activity just to keep in shape or to lose weight. While the binge eating or purging type, as I said earlier, they restrict their meals, but they engage in episodic binge eating habits, and they also use laxatives or induce vomiting to help lose everything they've eaten. So this class of patients, the binge eating purging type of anorexia nervosa patients, are at higher risk of having severe health complications due to the frequent fluctuations in their health and also in their metabolic state. So this case was about a 58-year-old lady who was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa about 15 years prior presentation. She came in with abdominal pain, right hip pain, and vomiting. Prior to this presentation, she was already known to the eating disorder unit, and she's also known to the psychiatric unit. Past medical history, of course, included anorexia nervosa. She had a DVT. She had pelvic congestive syndrome. And the drug history included olanzapine, rivaroxaban, lactulose. She was not a smoker, and she didn't drink alcohol, and her only allergen was to sertraline. On admission, her weight was 50.45 kilograms, a height of 1.78 meters, which gave a BMI of 17. Pulse was 54, temperature and blood pressure, SATs and respiratory rates were all normal. On examination, she was obviously cachectic, and she had tenderness in the right hip with some fluctuancy in the right lower abdomen and in the right lower hip also. There was no organomegaly on abdominal palpation. Her blood results were basically largely normal, but she had a raised CRP. So her CRP was 123, and her white cells were normal. But apart from the raised CRP, the other blood parameters were normal. She had a mild hypokalemia also of 2.8. But apart from that, LFTs, white cells, platelets, they were all normal. Coagulations were all normal here. So she had a CT abdomen and pelvis, which results indicated signs that showed a chronic osteomyelitis of the right pubic bone and also fluid collection in the right lower quadrant. MRI also confirmed the previous findings, and she was started on treatment of osteomyelitis while she also had the drainage of the abdominal fluid collection. So basically, this lady was under the orthopedic team for management of osteomyelitis after she had been drained of the pelvic fluid collection. But while she was on admission, because of her history of anorexia nervosa, this lady refused to eat, refused to drink, and it was noted that she was exercising a lot at the bedside. Sometimes she was running around the hospital. She was always exercising. She was always refusing oral intake. On day 9 of admission, it was noticed that her LFTs were becoming deranged. And that was when they were thinking this could probably be a drug-induced hepatitis. And she was switched from coaboxiclav, which was initially what she was on, to tiacoplanin after there was a discussion with the microbiologist. It was also noted that her weight had dropped from 39.3 and her BMI had dropped from 17 to 12.4. So weight was initially 50 on admission, had dropped to 39.3, and BMI had dropped from 17 on admission to 12.4. And this went on. So 2 weeks into the LFT derangement, she was finally referred to us, the gastro team, and we requested a non-invasive liver screen, an ultrasound scan of the liver, MRC. We requested all the tests that should be requested, basically. And she was subsequently transferred to the gastro ward. But all tests came back normal, came back perfectly fine. MRC was fine, blood tests were fine, ultrasound was fine. She was still refusing to eat. She was still losing weight. And by day 18, there was an MDT meeting, which involved the gastroenterologist, the mental health team, the psychiatrist, the eating disorder team, the community health team, and there was a consensus that this lady had to be sectioned under the Mental Health Act 3, which basically deprived her of most of her rights, and we had to come up with a plan to feed her enterally. So the dietitians were called. Also, dietitians were part of the meeting, and the plan was to start her on enteral NG feeds and monitor her bloods and response subsequently. On day 19, this lady was found unresponsive. As you can see from this chart here, on day 19, her blood glucose was 3.1, and she was found unresponsive, and she was immediately resuscitated with intravenous glucose. And as you can see from the table here, day 19, day 20, day 21, she was persistently hypoglycemic. So we could see values of 3.1, 5.2 on day 20, then 3.8, 2.7, 2.5. So she was persistently hypoglycemic for the next 8 to 10 days. And then this went on. She had a liver biopsy, which showed some mild lobular inflammation and diffuse activation of the Kupffer cells within the parenchyma. So these findings were in keeping with starvation or malnutrition hepatitis. So the biopsy was done even before she started the feeding regimen and before even she started having the hypoglycemic episodes, but the results came back much later. And this was what we found here. So the findings were in keeping starvation hepatitis. So the plan was just to continue feeding her and to continue monitoring her LFTs, continue monitoring her refeeding bloods, continue monitoring her weights. And just like that, her LFTs began to improve drastically. So as you can see, when she came in on the chart here, I'm not sure if this is clear enough. So when she came in, sorry. As you can see, when she came in, LFTs were normal. but it started to creep up. Then by day 9 to 11 to day 17, it went up to as high as 5,000. That was for the transaminases, and the same pattern was not observed in the cholestatic LFTs. And by day 19, which was when she started having the hypoglycemic episodes, it still continued, but that was when we started giving her the NG feeds. We put her under Section 3 of the Mental Health Act, and we started feeding her in a gradual and a calculated manner, and we could see the significant drop in the LFTs, as you can see here. So everything started to drop significantly. Although there was still a lag in the cholestatic LFTs, but compared to what we were having before, we could see a considerable improvement. And by day 33, 34, we could see it's almost back to normal, even though there was still a lag in the cholestatic LFTs, which is usually what we see when we see patients that have this type of hepatitis. So talking about the physiological, in all, this lady became better on admission. She was discharged from the gastro ward, and she was followed up by the eating disorder unit and the mental health team. And subsequently, our LFTs have remained stable ever since. So the physiological mechanisms here. So it has been well documented in literature that malnutrition leads to hepatocyte injury. And this is due to a process of programmed cell death known as autophagy. Now, it has been reported in some literature that over 50 to 60% of patients with anorexia nervosa will develop some degree of liver function tests or LFT derangements, and but mostly the transaminases are the ones that are affected. Now, depending on the degree of weight loss and how bad the anorexia nervosa is, we usually have not mild derangement, maybe like in the hundreds. But in severe cases where we have patients that have severe drop in BMI and severe starvation, we could have thousands. The LFTs might be deranged in the thousands, and that's what we saw in this patient. And if it's not properly managed, this could progress to severe malnutrition and acute liver failure. Also, because these patients are starving and they are not eating anything, they are at risk of having nutritional deficiencies, and which will also worsen the liver function. So one thing to note is that ALT is usually greater than the ASTs when we have patients with starvation hepatitis. Now, this picture is almost similar to most hepatitis pictures. So anything like maybe drug-induced hepatitis or even hepatitis B or C or viral hepatitis usually have the ALT superseding the ASTs. And this might be a little bit deceiving. It might confuse whoever is looking at the patient, because no one will quickly think of starvation hepatitis except the person has had the previous experience with this in the past. But also, we could also see this in the refeeding process. So sometimes when we start refeeding these patients, they tend to also have some degree of LFT derangement. But the way we can differentiate this LFT derangement that is secondary to a refeeding process is that most of the times, or sometimes, these patients who have deranged LFTs due to refeeding also have some signs of fatty liver on the ultrasound scan. So they have some signs of steatosis when we do an ultrasound scan. So this tells us that this is mainly liver injuries secondary to refeeding, which are not due to starvation hepatitis. So it's always good to have a prior ultrasound scan when they come in, or when they start having the LFTs, and another ultrasound scan later, just to check if there's any steatotic changes while they are on admission. Also, as I said earlier, these patients had lots of hypoglycemic episodes. Now, the theory is that this is most likely due to impaired gluconeogenesis and also due to reduced glycogen storages in the liver. Now, we all know that the liver is one of the sites of gluconeogenesis and also stores larger quantities of glycogen. So in patients with starvation hepatitis, not only are they starved and have depleted glycogen levels, the gluconeogenesis pathway is also impaired, and this leads to the recurrent hypoglycemia. And all this tends to resolve as soon as as a feeding plan is instituted. So it has been also noticed that there has been there's like an inversely proportional relationship between the BMI and LFTs. So it's been noted that patients with LFTs with BMI as low as 12 and below tend to have significantly deranged LFTs in the thousands. So many studies have been carried out which has buttressed this fact. And just like in this patient, her BMI dropped from 17 to about 12.4, and then this showed the significant LFT derangement that was seen in this patient. Also, we have some studies that were done in the US, whereby they took the biopsies of some patients, the liver biopsies of some patients who came in with severe anorexia nervosa and who also had LFT derangement. And the biopsies revealed that there were some there were signs of autophagy. So there were signs of cell death when they took the biopsies, which was also indicative of the establishment of this hepatitis. So all this points towards the multi-dimensional things that could happen, and the metabolic imbalances that could occur when patients have persistent starvation or have anorexia nervosa. So this is just a picture or chart showing what we do normally when patients come in with anorexia nervosa and they have signs of liver injury. So firstly, we take a good history, check the BMI, weight, take a history about weight loss, take an alcohol history, take a drug history. Then we do the blood test. So we do the non-invasive liver screen, do the autoimmune liver screen, we do an ultrasound scan of the liver. We do all this just to make sure that there are no other contributing factors apart from the anorexia nervosa that could be causing this. And by the time we do all this and all this appear normal, and the hepatologist further reviews, and we start having an inclination, or we start thinking that this could be staphylococcus hepatitis, that we institute the treatment plan, which is mainly just to refeed the patient. So we refeed and we gently monitor LFTs and see how things go. Most of the times they will improve just with simple refeeding and bed rest. And then finally, this slide just shows the multidisciplinary team approach to the management of patients with anorexia nervosa and liver injury. So the medical and the gastro team, which is where I belong, so we did the assessments, and we invited the relevant specialties to come review these patients, and also we instituted the plan, and we kept on our word for proper management. The dietitians play a major role in this case also because they are the ones who review these patients regularly. They also made the feeding plan for these patients. Now, this was quite tasking for the dietitians, because for a patient who has anorexia nervosa and they were trying to feed her because she was at risk of dying if she kept on having recurrent hypoglycemic episodes, they had to be very careful with the feeding plan. They had to negotiate with this lady on how we're going to feed her. At some point, she said no, even when we did the Mental Health Act Section 3 for this patient, she was still not fully cooperative until we had to talk to her and try to convince her that it was all for the best. And eventually she accepted. So the dietitians played an important role. The mental health team are also pivot in the management of this lady, because basically it's a mental health issue. So they were key in the management and of this patient. So they addressed all the psychological challenges that were associated with this lady. They tried to reassure her that she wasn't going to die if she ate, and just try to psych her up generally. And finally, the caregiver support. So we usually have the healthcare assistants on the ward who stayed with this lady 24 hours. So she had a dedicated healthcare assistant at all times with her, always monitoring her, making sure that she wasn't doing any exercises. As I said earlier, this lady was exercising a lot. She was exercising and she was inducing vomiting. So we make sure that we had a healthcare giver always with her, always monitoring her, just to make sure that she was not doing anything that would jeopardize her treatment. And that's the end of of the presentation. And thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
The title of my project is Environmental Enrichment, Episodic Memory and Hormone Expression. So just for a brief outline, I have a couple of slides on the background of the hormones that I looked at, the research aims of this project, the behavioral data, the initial results, cellular results, and then potential future work. So the focus of my research was essentially hormones that are related to memory and Alzheimer's. So this is important because loss of episodic memory specifically is one of the first symptoms of Alzheimer's disease to be reported by patients, caregivers, or even their doctors. And 1 in 3 people born in the UK will develop dementia at some point. And although there's no cure, there are currently lots of drugs in trials. So I looked at episodic memory, as I mentioned. So this is a specific type of memory that involves the spatial temporal context. So you remember what happened in terms of the what, when, and where, essentially. And then I looked at this in conjunction with metabolic hormones. So as I'm sure everyone knows, these are just signaling molecules in the body. So I looked at leptin, which is essentially the hormone that makes you feel full, reduces appetite, and it's also implicated in memory consolidation specifically. And then ghrelin is known as the hunger hormone. So this is released to make you feel hungry, and it also plays a role in memory formation and neurogenesis. And then dopamine, technically a neurotransmitter, is involved in the feelings of pleasure and motivation, and it's released during retrieval of memory as well as encoding. So just a little bit more of information about leptin. So leptin in relation to the brain has been shown to have neuroprotective effects, anti-inflammatory effects, and promotes neurogenesis by reducing oxidative stress on your cells. And then the receptor that I looked at was the OBAR receptor. So ghrelin as well prevents cell loss, enhances memory, and the receptor that I looked at was GHSR. And then for dopamine, finally, I looked at tyrosine hydroxylase as a measure. So first, I wanted to look at whether the effect of housing had an effect on memory performance. So this would be in relation to the rats that were used in the study. The second aim was to see whether OBAR, GHSR, or TH levels were significantly different between the two housing conditions. Third, I wanted to look at whether these levels were correlated with memory performance. And then finally, I wanted to quantify cell viability, specifically in hippocampal neuroblasts following leptin and ghrelin treatment. So as I mentioned, they were housed in 2 conditions. So they were either housed in standard housing. So this had 3 rats per cage. And then the enriched housing was essentially everything we'd want to promote physical, cognitive, and social health. So the cages were connected to other rats' cages. They had a running wheel to promote exercise. They were given new toys, which was essentially household objects that they could explore. And they were also housed in groups of 4 as opposed to groups of 3. So first, what I found in the study was that enriched housing did have an effect on their episodic memory testing, and it was significantly improved in the enriched condition. So when we look at it further, because I didn't mention that this is just the average memory score, whereas this is the memory score separated out by memory test. So all of these are versions of episodic memory tests. So you have object recognition, just the average score. You have object recognition with 5 samples. Here you have it with 2 samples. And then here you have an object context test with similar or dissimilar context. So all this is meaning is that the walls of the cage were different. So they were either striped or they weren't striped on the second test, or for the similar one, they both had the striped background. And then the final 2 tests were object place context tests, once again with similar and then dissimilar contexts. So when we separate it by specific subtype of memory, there's no significant differences between the two housing conditions. So then for my second aim, I was looking at correlating the hormone receptor levels with each memory score, as you can see on the y-axis. So we kind of judged that the rats were, quote, exploring an object when it was in close vicinity to it, directed by its nose. And what I found overall, so this is for looking at OBAR and object recognition tasks, there was no correlation. For OBAR and context-based tasks as well, there appears to be no correlations. This is a theme throughout all the correlations. None are significant across Ghrelin's receptor, GHSR as well. And then finally, none were significant between memory scores and TH. This is the context-based tasks. This is the object-place context tasks as well. So there appears to be no relationship between the memory score and receptor level, although housing had an effect, specifically on ghrelin, which was interesting. So then these are the whole brain hormone levels that I found. So looking at the leptin receptor, although slightly higher, not significant in the enriched housing. And then this was a significant result, which was quite interesting, that ghrelin was significantly higher in enrichment, because I initially expected leptin to show this result, as leptin has been shown to be neuroprotective specifically in these conditions. And then tyrosine hydroxylase results were almost identical between the standard and enriched housing. So then what I wanted to look at was, initially ghrelin was significantly increased. So does this mean that if we treat hippocampal cells with different concentrations of ghrelin along with leptin, that it will influence cell viability? So to do this, I looked at two measures. So one was using a crystal violet assay. So this essentially measured cell count, number of cells that survived at different time points, set time points. And then secondly, I used an LDH assay to look at membrane lysis. So the higher the LDH release, the more membrane damage, essentially. And then the cell culture line that I looked at were HT22 cells. So along the bottom here, you just have my cells with no treatment, and then different concentrations of leptin, different concentrations of ghrelin, and then combinations of the two. And then the red dashed line indicates 100% cell survival. So I normalized all the data to my control condition, essentially. So the condition that only had the cells and the media in it, required to keep the cells alive, but no treatment otherwise. So any values significantly above this line suggested increased cell proliferation. And then values below indicated cell death and then potential cytotoxic effects. So what we can see here is that there's no consistent trends across the treatment conditions, and none were found to be significantly cytotoxic or neuroprotective. And then when we look at cell viability using LDH, we kind of see the same results. And interestingly, when I compared the CV and LDH data, the trends were once again not consistent between cell count and LDH release, which you would expect, essentially, because if more cells are dying, then potentially there's more LDH release. However, this wasn't the case. So this suggests that kind of overall, if I just go back to the beginning somewhere. So this suggests that enrichment has an effect on episodic memory performance and memory scores. And then it also has an effect on ghrelin release and GHSR release. So this suggests that there is a relationship between the two. However, it suggests that it's independent of cellular pathways measurable by CV and LDH. So it might be that memory is increased by enrichment and ghrelin receptor levels are also increased by enrichment, but that the improvement in memory occurs independently of this ghrelin treatment, essentially. Yeah, so that was just my project. Thank you for listening.
I will present a study we conducted at the end of the COVID-19 pandemic on healthcare workers in several hospitals in Lombardy, a region in Italy, and was the region most affected by the virus in terms of number of infected people, hospitalized patients, and deaths. You will see how this prolonged emergency had an impact on the mental and physical health of healthcare workers. So the specific aim of our research was, first of all, to analyze levels of psychological well-being and psychophysical tiredness in the population of health workers in different hospitals in Lombardy, and examine the impact of the COVID health emergency on some specific psychological variables. And this research was an action research model. So the research was carried out in function of an intervention training and to find what kind of best support we could provide to healthcare workers. We published this research on the Italian Journal of Psychology, and Occupational Health. This, you can see the variables, the psychological variables we measure. We measure burnout with all measure with evidence-based questionnaire. So burnout with a link burnout questionnaire, psychological well-being with a general health questionnaire, relationship between work and private life, resilience, vigor, dedication and absorption, mindfulness, strategies of coping. And we also added 2 open questions. So we wanted to run a qualitative research. And the questions were: what was your biggest challenge during the health emergency? And what tired you the most during the health emergency period? I give you some statistic description of the sample, and you see the sample was made by 23% of male and 77% of female. That's normal in Italy because nurses and caregivers and hospital assistants are mainly women. And you see here also the distribution of age groups, and you see that the major age group was made by people from the 46 to 55 years. That's also a quite normal distribution on the job in Italy. We have, you know, a sort of senior population on the job compared with other countries. And you see here also the seniority on the job, and you can easily see that there are peaks, there are groups more represented than other groups. The group of people with very, very low seniority, so they just started to work, and people in the middle of their career, from 20 to 34 years of seniority on the job. Here, the description, you can see the sample distribution about the professionals. Half of the sample was made by nursing and obstetric staff, big group of medical doctors, also big group of hospital care support staff, so nursing assistant and so on, but also social workers, rehabilitation specialists, and so on. The sample, sorry, not having told you that before was made by 1,200 workers. We distributed the questionnaire to a larger number of people, but in that period of was the end of the emergency, but they had still to deal with many hospitalized patients, and so we didn't receive all the questionnaire backs, but quite only the, let's say, 60% as a response rate. Here you have just statistical data, but that's very important because you can see the alpha Cronbach value of all the variables, all the psychological characteristics we have acquired, and you see with this alpha Cronbach very good, very high level. It means that the questionnaire and the study has a very high reliability and validity, which is statistically, as you know, very important. Here you have a positional analysis and dispersion of all the different variables, psychological characteristics, and you see that there are any of them which follow a normal distribution of frequency curve, the Gauss curve, and other not. That's also normal because we will see certain variables very highly expressed only in certain group of people and not in not so generalized. You see the different curves of this distribution. But let's have a look to the correlational analysis, which is, my opinion, the most interesting part of this kind of research, psychometric research. We created an equation model, a path analysis, a structural equation model. These numbers are the regression weights, and you can see which variable it's influencing in a positive way another variable, or influencing in a negative, from a statistical point of view, way the other variable. It means there are variables that increase other attitude, and there are variables that decrease the attitude. Let's keep resilience. Resilience, more a person, a worker is resilient, and you see more force, more vigor he has, and less avoidance strategies, and less you see the negative regression weights, less psychological discomfort. But what was so interesting for us is to see how mindfulness was a variable so important in this path analysis, because as you see, more the worker has a mindful attitude, more force he has, and less inefficacy, less psychological exhaustion, less psychological discomfort and disillusion. So it's sort of, it appears very clear that mindfulness, it's a sort of protection, a very important protection from all these variables which are very negative, this sort of very dangerous also attitude, leading very often to burnout or to quitting or quite quitting. This was very interesting for us because that led us to create a mindfulness training group among these healthcare workers with very interesting result, very important result. And then I want to show you some significant differences among the characteristics of the sample. And you see we can see here how disillusionment it's very low in these are the age of the people, sorry. And you see in younger people, it's very low. In elderly people, it's very low, which maybe can be strange and not so evident, but they are less disillusioned. And the most disillusioned group of people are the people in the 40s and 50s. And also the vigor. The vigor is very low. Obviously, they were very tired, they overloaded and exhausted during COVID-19. But you see that older people, they have more vigor, more force than younger people, which is not so evident if you think so in a natural way and not running a correct research. You see the dedication to the work, again, very, very low, unfortunately, because of this overload, this overworking. But you see that more the elderly group, the older group, they keep on they can maintain absorption and dedication. Then you see a different trend about social support. You see that young people look for social support and receive social support. They feel they have social support. And you see that increasing the age, the social support decrease. And in the older group, it's very, very low, the social support. That's something that, you know, we have also generally in the society that unfortunately old people very often they feel alone, they have they lose social support. The avoidance strategies, so not to face the problem but to escape from the problem. Again, the youngest people use a lot these avoidance strategies. They try to forget it. They try to run away from the problem. And the older people, they do not that. Then you see the exhaustion. And here you have not the age, but the seniority on the job. And you see that at the very beginning, that you can imagine that quite easily, there is very low exhaustion. They just began to work, but then you see that this exhaustion increase a lot, but there is a peak in people with from 15 to 24 years of seniority. This group of people very often are people also with a load from the family, because they very often have small children, or maybe elder old parents to take care of, and probably they for this reason they feel so exhausted. This is the distribution of the professional ineffectiveness, and you see that at the beginning there is no ineffectiveness, but there is a peak of ineffectiveness that's quite strange at the beginning of the career, not just immediately after they start working, but after 5-9 years. They are this group represent the people with less capacity, effectiveness in the work. Probably they have not yet enough experience, but they are already tired in a way. And you see the ineffectiveness, it's very low, which is mean on the opposite, they are highly effective in the older people again. Disillusionment, there is no disillusion at the very beginning, but there is a high disillusion in work in the middle of the career. And again, you see psychological distress. Again, you see a curve where you see that at the beginning of the career and the end of the career, you have no disillusion, no distress, less distress, and you have a very high distress in this group of people with 15 to 24 years of service in the hospital. Probably for the reason I was mentioning before, probably they have probably more responsibility on the job, but also more responsibility in the family and in their private life. Same curve and same distribution you can see in the work-family conflict. You see, this is the group in this age of seniority. You have the group with that suffer mainly of work-family conflict. The vigor, it's very high at the beginning of the career, and it's again very high at the end of the career, but very low in the middle of the career, which is very dangerous. This result show us that we have to take care, much more care of the people in this stage of the career, because when you see these people with so good result, elder people, elder workers with so good results, it means unfortunately that there was a sort of natural selection, unfortunately. So the people not being so resilient, not so able to cope with stress and overworking and overload, probably they quit. And so we have a sort of natural selection here. Again, dedication, same curve, high at the beginning, high at the end, very low in the middle of the career. And the same absorption. Absorption is how to concentrate in the work you do. And absorption is very important because more you concentrate in your work, less errors you risk to human error you risk to do. Social support, again, also for the seniority of the job, less seniority, more social support, longer seniority, less social support, because obviously it's linked to the age. Same with the positive attitude. People start with very positive attitude, and here there is the group of the elder workers that keep a positive attitude, but here you have in the middle of the career and in the middle also it's linked to the age, very less positive attitude. At the end, we also did a qualitative analysis of the open answer. And unfortunately, it was an Italian questionnaire, so I can just translate for you the 10 most frequent words we collected. The qualitative analysis was much more complex, but was made all in Italian language. And so I didn't put slide on for this conference, but we made it with Max QDA software, so in a very precise way. But the 10 most frequent words about in the answer of the question, what was your biggest challenge during the health emergency, was fear, patience, work, lack. So I'm missing something. I lack, and to manage. And the other question, what tired you the most during the health emergency period? Again, work, stress, turnover, DPI, so the protection measure, uncertainty, stress, overload, and again, lacking of something, and patient. At the very end, we also ran a SWOT, where you can see strong point, weak points, opportunity, and threats. Strong points was this involvement and dedication to the work that in any case, even in this tremendous emergency situation that healthcare workers keep on. But you see that weak points were this high level of psychophysical fatigue and a lack of organization in the hospital and lack of communication. We gave as opportunities the possibility to run other research, other studies to follow up the condition, the well-being condition of the healthcare workers, to give support. And for example, we started doing this training in this mindfulness training for all the healthcare workers, and to also run programs of stress management. Threats we have seen at the end of this research was the risk to quit. You know, there is the quitting, the real quitting the work, but also that quiet quitting we know. So I work but completely disillusioned and with no more wish to do my job. Burnout of the healthcare operators, and unfortunately a big impact on the family and private life of all these medical doctors, nurses, and healthcare workers. That's the summary of our study, and I really thank you for your time and your attention. You can find here the website of our institute, also in English, and my email. Thank you.